but to our knowledge, there are no Americans on the platinum label status, gold label status, but 3 American women were ranked in the top 24 for the marathon event group. And that would be Sarah Hall, Emma Bates, and Kira D'Amato. Based on our latest research, we had no idea, again, that there is a label fee. But this is definitely a point that we want to look a little bit more into and try and understand, because there seems to be a disparity between the athletes that are ranked on the World Athletics site and then the actual athletes that are provided a certain type of status. Hey everyone, welcome back to Running the Show. This is your co-host Evan Schwartz. Today we're going to try something a little bit different, and we're going to do kind of a solo monologue episode. This is going to be what we kind of refer to as a deep dive, or kind of the name we've been using, Drew, Emma, and I. We're gonna each have an opportunity in the very near future to talk about a subject that we're a little bit more interested in taking a deeper dive into. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about World Athletics, which is an international governing body, and what they refer to as road race labels. Before we get started, if you haven't listened to the show before, this is Running the Show. Myself, Evan Schwartz, and my co-hosts Drew Hartman and Emma Cortez. We take a look at the intersection of running and business. This will kind of teeter on the line between both of them. We're going to talk about some actual concrete numbers in terms of dollars spent towards different initiatives, and we're going to talk about how some of these huge races actually end up coming to be. So if you like the show, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, rate it however you feel is appropriate. We'd appreciate 5 stars. Share the show with any friends that you think might be interested in hearing what we have to talk about. And then if you're interested in hearing us take a little bit more of a deep dive into a subject you're kind of curious about when it comes to the intersection of running and business, let us know. And if there's someone you'd love for us to have on the show as we get started in our first few episodes, please let us know. As we get started here, again, this is going to be taking a deep dive into World Athletics and what they refer to as road race labels, or label road races. There is going to be some terminology that is very, very similar between what World Athletics deems as different type of labels. But the thing to kind of know is that, again, World Athletics is an international governing body when it comes to track and field and athletics in general. The thing we are going to be talking about today, though, is specifically road races. So let's get into it. I'm going to start off with the definition from the World Athletics website. So they have a big book of rules, and one of the subsections of Book of Rules is a 20-plus page PDF that describes rules about bidding and being accepted in as a road race, so as a label road race. And we're going to take a look at that process. To get started, the first kind of definition and the first kind of information that World Athletics gives is that the World Athletics Label Road Races program gathers the world's leading road races. A World Athletics label denotes a full application of the competition and technical rules in, at minimum, the elite component of the competition. Labels also denote superior standards in event organization, safety and runner experience, support from public authorities to the event, and a financial commitment to anti-doping. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about all those specific points, but to start out, this will add a little bit of confusion, but hopefully it won't be too much. There are 4 different types of labels. There is a World Athletics label, which for all these races, we don't necessarily think of them as less competitive or less good races. They're just different standards that all of these races are held to. So World Athletics label, there's a elite label, a gold label and platinum label. The race distances we talk about are 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, and 50K. We also have a definition of different races that count towards world rankings in the marathon and road running. And those are 15K, 10 miles, 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers, and 30 kilometers. And then to throw a wrench into things, the third sub bullet point here is classic races over other non standard distances. So, one thing that I found, and then when Emma, Drew, and I had talked about this previously too, is that a lot of similarities in the world athletics event rules, and the different definitions list out very specific criteria. Again, like we just talked about, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, then some other round number distances. And then also the third bullet point, any other classic races we just decide to recognize, those are part of this too. So that's a similarity we'll see kind of repeat itself as we dive a little bit further into things. Race organizers, as they go through this application process to receive a label, and we'll talk about the benefits of having a label as well in just a little bit, but race organizers can only be granted a label if the race has taken place for at least 2 consecutive years prior to 2023. Cancellations due to COVID in 2020 through 2022 won't be considered as a break in continuity. And that's something that we definitely like to see. We don't want to see, a really popular race that maybe couldn't be put on due to local health, kind of regulations during the pandemic, and miss out on the status that they could potentially have to make themselves a bigger, more appealing race to people running it. Uh, Although the next point is that there are exemptions from this requirement that can be granted at World Athletics sole discretion in case of races with a high sporting profile, provided that World Athletics is satisfied with the track record of the race organizer. So, again, a little bit of kind of listing out here are the exact requirements that we have, but in certain cases we can make exemptions. To our knowledge and research, there weren't any races that had applied that were denied status because they couldn't continue during the pandemic. We didn't find any examples of those. Let's talk about the performance aspect now. So the World Athletics Elite label, organizers have to have a certain performance level. And for the elite performance level, they have to have at least 5 athletes per gender who have recorded in the 2021, 2022, and 2023 season, any of those, at least one World Athletics legal performance within a table that has a list of standards, and who have recorded a specific type of performance in a relevant race. So this is a kind of interesting first look at it. Says, oh, if I want to put on a brand new race and 5 of my friends are some of the top 5K runners in the world, I can have a really popular, super high performing race for a marathon just because I have people that are really fast. There's some, considerations that they put on this table, and we'll link some of these resources if you are curious to look at the associated imagery as we're kind of talking about it too. But the main point here is that to be able to put on a marathon of elite label status, you got to get 5 people, 5 runners of each gender that have performed in the last 3 years a specific performance. And this specific performance for men is 2:12:47. For women, it is 2:31:50. There are kind of equivalents as you drop down all the way to 5K or 5,000 meters on the track, and as you bump up to 50K. The other important point here is that besides bringing at least 5 athletes per gender who have recorded a performance equivalent to, again, 2:12:47 marathon for men, 2:31:50 marathon for women, you also have to provide a minimum guaranteed prize money structure that we'll talk about in just a little bit as well. The thing, again, that threw a wrench into everything as we read this, Emma, Drew, and I, we thought that sounds reasonable. To have an elite level race, you probably need to bring a certain number of athletes, in this case, 5 per gender, that meet a certain requirement level. The thing that then threw a wrench in here was that there is an or point. So athletes have to either meet a certain performance level, and the race director has to deliver a minimum guaranteed prize money structure, or the race has to contribute to the 2023 Solidarity Fund for Elite Distance Runners pursuant to Regulation 8 below. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but that was something that when we were looking through the information and kind of the rule book here, we tilted our heads and we were like, wait, what? What is this? This is an or. So, races can skip this whole process of meeting certain athletic elite achievement requirements that are listed in this long, complicated, drawn out table. If they contribute to a thing called the 2023 Elite Distance Runner Solidarity Fund, none of us had ever heard of it. And we, frequently are scouring through running social media. And so this was a super interesting thing to kind of learn about. To have a gold label race, is the exact same requirements as an elite level race. And then a platinum level race has to have at least 3 athletes per gender with platinum status. So this isn't necessarily talking about their credit cards, reward points. This is a specific athlete ranking system that we'll get into a little bit later as well. Plus at least 4 athletes per gender with gold status. And then again, this or thrown in here, contribute to the 2023 Solidarity Fund for Elite Distance Runners pursuant to Regulation 8 below. The other thing that goes along with this, as we talk about the different labels, is label fees. So there is a fee to carry a certain label per year when it comes to World Athletics labels for races. So for a marathon to just have the general World Athletics label, it is $2,500. For an elite label race, it's $9,000. For a gold label race, it's $20,000. And for a platinum label race for World Athletics, that is a marathon, it is $50,000 as a label fee. Any other distance for general World Athletics label? So we have marathon and any other distance as the kind of 2 different options with different associated fees. We go $1,000 for any other distance for just a general label. We go $3,600 for an elite label for any other distance. We have $8,000 as the label fee for a gold label, any other distance race, and then a platinum label race that is any other distance than a marathon. It is $20,000. Based on the time we're recording this, we didn't get a chance to take the full deep dive and calculate the exact number of dollars that World Athletics is expected to collect via label fees for races. But by using the ranges and the different races that are listed on the current World Athletics calendar, we have 227 races for the calendar year of 2023. And pricing these out between the different price tiers, we get somewhere between $1.27 million and $2.29 million that World Athletics will collect via label fees. I know a question that some people might be asking is, well, how many platinum label races are there? That was something we wanted to nail down for sure. The number of platinum races, there are 13 platinum races. 2 of them are women's only marathons in Japan. And so if you have a single gender race, as described in the World Athletics rules, the required amount for a label fee is cut in half. And so the total amount that World Athletics will collect from the 13 different platinum label races is $600,000. And again, the total amount that is expected based on the information provided in this rulebook is $1.27 million and then up to to $9 million. There's no description of where this money goes. It might be assumed that it's paid directly to World Athletics, but the financial statements have not been disclosed from 2022. So we don't necessarily know how much of that money came in last year and where that money might be held and where that money might be spent. As we learned just a bit ago about the 2023 Solidarity Fund for Elite Distance Runners, there is apparently a fund that is gathered, but the World Athletics label fee does not. It is not described at all where that is going and what that is used for. The other follow-up here too is athlete labels. So as we mentioned, platinum label races have to bring in 3 platinum label athletes per gender plus 4 gold label athletes per gender. A platinum label athlete means that they are ranked in the top 24 in the marathon event group. And World Athletics has a athlete status list on their website, and there are currently 29 men with a platinum status, which means that they can be brought to certain races or recruited to run certain races to fulfill a platinum, uh, you know, equivalent or a platinum status for that race. There are currently 104 men with a gold label status. There are 29 women with a platinum label status, and there are 89 women with a gold label status. And that is readily available on World Athletics website under athlete labels. The thing that Emma, Drew, and I had talked about when we looked over this sort of rule is that there seems to be, versus the number of platinum label road races out there, 13 marathons out there seems to be maybe not enough athletes to actually meet that requirement to have 3 athletes per gender at each of these marathons, unless you have athletes that overlap. It is just not possible with the current number of platinum athletes and the current number of platinum label road races. And the thing that we don't necessarily get to see is the application status. Which races are bringing which platinum level athletes and which gold level athletes. But it might be an interesting, question to ask which races bring athletes just to check off a box and fulfill a requirement because they need to meet a certain performance level, or which races reserve a certain number of starting positions in the elite recruitment side for athletes of a certain label status. The kind of chicken or the egg question that also gets asked is how does an athlete become a platinum label athlete? They have to be ranked in the top 24, or as we see it, about the top 30 athletes in the marathon event group. Well, you get that type of status as an athlete by being, ranked based on your finishing position at these big races, and a lot of these big races are platinum level races that need to have a platinum level athlete. And so it gets very circular in terms of the athletes that get recruited to run these races might have already met good performance standards, but that means that there could be a lower chance for somebody that could need that next break in their running career to just get a chance to start on the start line of one of these huge marathons, but they might not get the chance because they're not in the top 29 and the race director might not recruit them or their agent might not put them up for consideration because they might not help the race out to fulfill that platinum label status that they might be looking for. There are plenty of other gold label status races as well, but the kind of circular thing that Emma, Drew, and I were talking about is it does seem very much like a chicken or the egg situation where you have to be ranked very, very well to be brought to these big races to perform well, to then continue to be ranked well too. And so we had, never really looked into which athletes in the past were ranked at a certain level and brought to races versus, maybe their finishing places, or which athletes were boosted from being a gold label athlete to a platinum label athlete, which might make them a lot more appealing to recruit for a big race too. So something interesting. We definitely wanted to take another deep dive into it after this episode as well. The next piece that is relevant to this is the athlete representative fee for platinum and gold status athletes. So, athlete representatives of athletes, you might know them as agents. These are certified athlete representatives through World Athletics. There's a whole course, there's a whole fee that you have to pay to be an agent or an athlete representative. There are a ton of benefits in terms of an organization like USA Track and Field, USATF, or national governing body can talk to an agent to get an athlete to go to a big national level race, or these races can go through an agent and have the agent negotiate an appearance fee for athletes too. So athlete representatives serve as a way of communication, but also a way of getting athletes into other races that they might not necessarily have the ability to get into. There's a ton more that athlete representatives do as well, and we'd love to talk about that more in a future episode. This point is regarding athlete representative fees, again, for platinum and gold status athletes. Athlete representatives of athletes eligible for platinum or gold status will be contacted and asked to confirm the status of the athlete by paying the AR contribution, a fee of $1,200 for platinum status or $400 for gold status. If either an athlete representative declines to pay the AR contribution, or an athlete is ineligible for any other reason, then the athlete will not be allocated to the relevant status, which will be offered to the next ranked athlete until the quotas are filled. When an athlete does not have an athlete representative, the athlete will be contacted to pay the fee directly. So, this was another sort of question mark that got thrown out to us as we were going through the rule book. We had no idea that athletes that are ranked of a certain ranking. So again, to meet this platinum or gold level ranking, the athlete representative or agent has to pay a fee. And then if the athlete doesn't have an athlete representative, they're asked to pay the fee themselves to be ranked in a certain ranking that, again, like we were just talking about, might help get them into that next big race to solidify their rankings for the next season as well too. So that was something we had no idea. We took a little look at the current athlete rankings on World Athletics and the Marathon Event Group, which is a site that you can go through and sort at any time. You can look at worldwide rankings for any type of event. You can look at specific rankings in certain countries for different event groups too. To our knowledge, there are, because we're based in the US, we took a look to see if there are any American based athletes in the platinum and gold level status. There are none. We took a look at the world rankings for the marathon event group, and we did find, based on the latest cutoff, things get really, really murky here too in terms of the date that World Athletics uses for these platinum and gold level rankings. But to our knowledge, there are no Americans on the platinum label status, gold label status, but three American women were ranked in the top 24 for the marathon event group. And that would be Sarah Hall, Emma Bates, and Kira D'Amato. Based on our latest research, we had no idea, again, that there is a label fee. But this is definitely a point that we want to look a little bit more into and try and understand, because we could totally be missing, some subchapter in, section 14 and another resource. But based on the easiest and most accessible information under event rule guidelines and the attached resources, there seems to be a disparity between the athletes that are ranked on the World Athletics site and then the actual athletes that are provided a certain type of status. The next point in here is appearance negotiations, athlete contracts, prizes, and payment terms. So, like we mentioned at the beginning, there is a minimum guaranteed prize money structure for elite and gold label races. For the elite label marathon, it is $15,000 for first, $7,500 for second, $5,000 for third, $2,500 for fourth, $2,000 for fifth, $1,500 for sixth place, $1,000 for seventh place, and $500 minimum for eighth place in an elite label marathon. For gold label marathon, it bumps up to $30,000 for first, $15,000 for second, $10,000 for third. Then it goes $5,000, $4,000, $3,000, $2,000, $1,000 for fourth place down through eighth place. The interesting point that we thought here, we thought it was good to have a specific minimum prize money structure. This maybe shows that races that are pursuing this little bit higher end status, that they have to have a minimum amount of finances in order to be able to put on this race. But the next point that we saw was that there's no minimum prize money requirements for races categorized as World Athletics label. So again, that is that one with the least amount of requirements, and Platinum label, the races that are required to have a $50,000 fee to be labeled platinum, and then some other associated fees later on too. It is interesting to us, and we could not figure out why there is no even more stringent standards that these platinum label races have to subscribe to. We took a look at all the different platinum level races or platinum label races, and they all have good prize money, but they don't have a consistent prize money across the board. We just couldn't think through logically why a platinum label race would not be required to provide even higher minimum prize money compared to a gold label race and an elite label race. There was another interesting section related to the athlete's contribution. Except for those races contributing to the 2023 Solidarity for Elite Distance Runners Fund, I think I said that correctly without having to read it off the screen. Except for those races contributing to the fund, pursuant to Regulation 8, in all elite gold and platinum label races, there is a 2% levy on the published gross prize money before any penalties and taxes. For the top 8 overall finishers, this levy represents the elite athlete's contribution to the anti-doping fund. The contribution will be deducted by race organizers from the sums paid to elite athletes and paid by the race organizer directly to World Athletics. So there's a 2% levy on the published gross prize money to go to a anti-doping fund, and this comes directly out of that prize money. The next part related to anti-doping, this goes seamlessly into that. The dedicated road races anti-doping program will be managed by Athletics Integrity Unit. This is the AIU that people might have heard of when it comes to maybe recent doping positives or positive drug tests. This is the Athletics Integrity Unit. Out of competition tests for elite athletes is included in this anti-doping program, including planning, performance monitoring, whereabouts management, sample collection, and analysis. There are targeted pre-competition tests at World Athletics label and elite label races. The Athlete Biological Passport Program, which is testing their levels over time, keeping track of that profile and seeing how the levels shift throughout time, is included. Results and case management, so a review and follow-up of atypical results if an athlete tests in an atypical way. Managing anti-doping rule violations, including referral to the World Athletics Disciplinary Tribunal, and if applicable, the Court of Arbitration of Sport. An education program for elite athletes, and investigations and intelligence services. This is all included, and part of that 2% levy on all published prize money goes to this specific fund. There is a slight difference when it comes to platinum races, and we'll talk about that as we wrap up the show in a little bit. Now we get to the only description I just took a full screenshot of the full description of what is called the fund. So capital T in the and capital F in fund. The fund has been established for race organizers to support world-class elite running and shall be held and managed by World Athletics. Distribution from the fund will be decided by World Athletics in its sole discretion, but always in consultation with the authorized athlete representatives and contributing race organizers. For example, the fund may be used to organize ad hoc elite races, to co fund elite races at existing label races, provide direct grants to athletes or similar athletes' welfare measures. The fund cannot be used to fund World Athletics administrative or operational costs. And that is literally the only information that we were able to find in the rulebook about the fund. The amount of contributions is listed, and the marathon elite contribution is $50,000 for a gold label. It is $100,000 for platinum. It's $200,000. For any other race distance, it is 20,000. For gold, it is 40,000. And for platinum, any other distance besides marathon, it is 80,000. We were so confused upon reading this because the wording and the description seems very confusing. Again, when we go to look at label status, races are required based on the label they're pursuing. Again, to provide a label fee that they have to pay, they have to have at least a minimum performance standard for number of athletes. They have to guarantee prize money for the certain structure that we just talked about, or they contribute to the 2023 Solidarity Fund for Elite Distance Runners pursuant to Regulation 8. And that is what we just covered. So the thing that we were confused about, and we would love clarification, and we're in the process of doing a lot more research as well, is if the listed amounts in the table and the amount of contributions, if that is the total amount that World Athletics is collecting from different race organizers for these label statuses, or if that is the amount that they have to pay if they want to just skip over guaranteeing a certain amount of prize money, if they want to skip over bringing a certain amount of athletes with a certain type of performance standard. Because you could imagine if you're ranked in the top 5 in your platinum label athlete, you could go to a race and say, I want $100,000. And the 2 other platinum athletes, or the 5 other platinum athletes that will also have to be there for a platinum label race, they might also say, we want $100,000 for showing up to your race. And suddenly you have $600,000 you have to pay these 6 people for an appearance fee, but you could skip that by not necessarily having to have the same exact level of athletes and pay $200,000 into this solidarity fund for elite distance runners. Um, Confusing in terms of the wording, but we're continuing to find more information and resources. The questions that we had immediately, and we'd love to know any questions that people have as they're listening to this. The questions we have is, what is this money being used for? So this was a fund that was created late 2021 for the 2022 season. The only mention of different types of funds that World Athletics has mentioned is creating a fund in uh, April of 2020 to support athletes during the pandemic. And this was prior to the creation of the Solidarity Fund for Elite Distance Runners. The World Athletics Fund in 2020 was 500,000 US dollars total to support professional athletes experiencing financial hardship due to the pandemic. The only other result is Ukrainian athletes benefiting from a fund to attend the World Championships in 2022. And World Athletics distributed more than 220,000 US dollars to support Ukrainian athletes preparing for the World Championships and the World Under 20 Championships. They also were able to establish a solidarity fund from the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee. So this $220,000 was on top of $2.5 million that was already provided to the Ukrainian Olympic community and sports movement. Any other information is only referring to the World Athletics Handbook and the event rules. It is very hard to find where the money is held, what the money is specifically used for from the fund, and it does not show up. Again, the 2022 financial statements have not been released yet from World Athletics. We would love to see if that is a section in terms of a description of a fund being used. There is a separate fund that goes back to the 1980s that is funded by the Prince of Monaco for different athletics related projects. And to date, there have been, up into 2020, there have been over 400 projects funded via this separate fund that is not the Solidarity Fund for elite distance runners. The fund is provided again from the Prince of Monaco and is not provided from road race organizers seeking a certain type of label status. So that is probably the biggest question mark that we have found in this deep dive. And we are just not sure, again, how much money has been contributed, because there is no place that is at least publicly available right now to see which races actually have met the standards of recruiting the number of athletes that they're supposed to based on the rules set out by World Athletics. There is no place to find which races have agreed to the prize money structure. Again, the prize money structure can be variable between these 227 different races. And there's no place that we have found in our research to be able to see which races have skipped over those requirements and contributed to the 2023 Solidarity Fund for elite distance runners. But that is some information that we would love to see and we would love to have as an open and transparent thing. The reasoning being that the 2023 Solidarity Fund for elite distance runners, also known as the fund, is only, again, World Athletics has the sole discretion as listed in their event handbook and event information. They have sole discretion in conjunction with authorized athlete representatives, which is a group of agents that is not published, the agents that are, authorized, and the event organizers. We agree that people paying into the fund should be consulted when it comes to using that fund, but we have no idea who is being consulted because we have no idea who is paying in to that fund or the fund. So that left a big question mark in our mind, and a lot more Googling and maybe some duck going, maybe looking down the Bing rabbit hole as well, looking at all the different types of search engines just to find more information, because it seems like there is not a lot of information out there. So biggest question mark. There's some other interesting points when it comes to advisement on how to process things for race day. So what is encouraged for races is to have a pre-race technical meeting with the international elite athletes and their representatives, where all arrangements for the race, things like warm-up schedule, desired configuration of refreshment stations, you might know them as like water bottle tables. If you see elite marathons, people picking up the water bottles off the side, how to reach the finish line in case of dropout, etc. All these things must be communicated. The pacemakers must be introduced to the international elite athletes. And then if the technical meeting is conducted in a language other than English, English translation shall be provided. When Emma, Drew, and I talked about this, we thought that we would love to see a little bit more equitable situation of a translator provided in the native or requested language of anybody in the elite field that is coming to this elite technical meeting, because they have to be briefed with information. We would just love to see other translations available besides English if the meeting was presented not in English, or if it was presented in English, we would love to just see personal translation available via World Athletics to these elite athletes that are competing. Before the start, there has to be controlled access to secured areas. There has to be signposting that's clear and informative. Again, this is on the back of the point that we just talked about. We would love to make sure that the translations for all signs and information is available to everyone. There have to be separate gender changing facilities. And if wheelchair or handbike races are held with the event, there have to be disabled toilets provided. There has to be an efficient bag drop off service. For both elite and, if applicable, the mass race. And then starting corrals must be seated by pace and a expected finish time. So these are all requirements. All the language was listed from the World Athletics Event Rules Handbook as well. There has to be a lead vehicle preceding the lead runners to direct the runners around the course. And wherever possible, it shall include a time clock indicating the time elapsed since the start of the race. When it's safe to do so in mixed races, so this is combined start races, a lead vehicle shall precede both men's and women's race leaders. The lead vehicle and any other vehicle on the course should not block the athlete's view of the shortest possible path. Where possible for elite gold and platinum label races, a distinctive line of any color shall be painted on the course to indicate the shortest possible route. This is probably the one question we want to hear answered from people listening to this deep dive episode. If you could have any color line painted on the ground to highlight the shortest possible path, what color would you choose? That would be a super fun thing to hear from anybody listening. The last point here is that in mixed gender races, the handing of a refreshment from a male to a female athlete may result in the disqualification of the female athlete if a situation of unfair assistance occurs. That's the only thing they elaborate on there, and it doesn't apply specifically to hired pacemakers from the race, but it highlights a potential unfair assistance by having refreshment collected for a particular competitor. The next point here, and this is the second to last thing before we wrap up the show, is all about drug testing. So, in our first episode, I talked about how I would love to totally rework and change the drug testing system when it comes to athletics. Except for platinum races, pre competition tests will be organized directly by the AIU, or Athletics Integrity Unit, on a targeted basis as part of the dedicated anti doping program at a number of label road races. Race organizers will be informed sufficiently in advance that pre competition tests will be conducted at their race, but they must keep this information confidential on a need to know basis so as not to provide the competing athletes with notice of the testing. There are some famous examples in the past few years, notably the London Marathon. Having a high profile athlete come testing positive due to a pre competition test and actually not starting the race due to a positive drug test. Pre competition tests will mainly consist of blood tests in the context of the athlete biological passport to be conducted in the period preceding the race, preferably at the main athlete's hotel. Again, all this stuff too, as listed in the event rules, comes out of that 2% levy and also the rest of the Athletics Integrity Unit fund. Race organizers may be requested to assist with facilitating pre-competition testing operations. So, getting the right doping control staff accredited, making sure they have access to the venue, making sure that there is a booking at the race's main hotel. Platinum label races, however, and remember, this is the level of race that has to pay a $50,000 fee to even be labeled. Platinum label races are required to organize at their own expense systematic pre competition tests for all athletes in the international elite field as defined by the race organizer. And these tests are highlighted to preserve the integrity of performances achieved at label road races. The minimum number of tests to be conducted follows in the table below. At a platinum label race, the highest label race, they have to have at least 12 tests, which is 6 men and 6 women, including 6 with EPO analysis. And that is the only type of test highlighted, besides encouraging or suggesting that most of these tests are done via a blood draw in the information above. At a gold label, it is 10 tests, 5 men, 5 women. Elite label, it is 8, 4 men, 4 women. And a regular World Athletics label, 4 tests, 2 men, 2 women, including 2 with EPO analysis. The question mark that Emma, Drew, and I had was highlighting EPO analysis on its own and not necessarily any other type of uh, prohibited or banned substance that might trigger more positive tests in an out of competition test as well. So we were kind of scratching our heads at that specific call out. But the platinum label races, again, are required to, at their own expense, provide pre competition tests. And then every one of these races has to provide at least a certain number of these other tests, testing specifically for EPO as well. Um, there was another fun question that we have for everybody listening. All platinum label races must provide in the finish area at least one giant video screen to allow spectators to follow the race. In your mind, what type of video screen is giant? We would love to hear about that because we kind of got in a heated debate over whether huge or giant or gigantic or humongous was the biggest term in terms of video screen. But it is required at all platinum label races that you have to have at least one giant video screen. So we'd love to hear a definition of what a giant video screen is. Um, a couple more things as we wrap up here. These are just kind of picking out interesting points for further discussion, maybe in the future. But elite gold and platinum races should have a dedicated website with, at minimum, start lists and results in English. For gold and platinum races, a fully functional website in English is required. We kind of talked a little bit more in depth about how technology might make it a little bit easier to access a website. I know some of the Google Chrome plugins have an automatic translator if you're going to a web page that maybe isn't your preferred language. And so World Athletics might have accounted for that type of thing too. But there is a specific requirement, again, for English only if the website is not operated in English already. There has to be an alternative if it's a gold or platinum label race. The last 2 points here, there was a specific call out to course measurers. And this could be a deep dive on its own about how you get accredited to be a course measurer, all the things that go into actually measuring for courses. Based on World Athletics' most recent total, there are 296 total course measures that are verified via World Athletics. 15 out of them are women out of the 296 total. And so it seemed like there is a bit of disparity there. And there was a lack of equality in terms of representation. But we would love to take a little bit more deep dive into the world of course measuring and kind of see what goes into it, who are maybe the spearheads and who are the people at the top that kind of accredit people and what the whole process looks like to actually be a verified course measure. The last point here is that there is a very good document on the World Athletics site that we'd love to talk to an expert in sustainability about. There is a specific drive towards sustainability, and all label road races are expected to score a minimum number of points based on the type of label they're going for. So there's really good documentation on the World Athletics site that lists different types of macro areas. So there's 6 different types of macro areas. And for each rank of label status, that races can apply for, they have to meet a certain number of points, with platinum label races meeting at least 90 points. I believe the total scoring you can get is 120, at least 90 points. Gold label is 60. World Athletics elite label is 45, and World Athletics label is 30 out of 120 total points based on our latest research. That is the last point we had to talk about in this deep dive. To kind of sum things up, there is a full, book of rules on the World Athletics site that is able and there to be able to kind of take a deep dive of your own on if you're interested. There's a ton of money that goes into road races because, again, what we talked about is just label status, not necessarily closing down roads, having volunteers, providing supplies, the actual amount of money that goes into recruiting athletes to come run the race, even though it seems like it's kind of questionable and maybe up in the air about how athletes get recruited and what different types of athletes have to be at certain races. Biggest question mark again in our mind is how much money is in the solidarity fund for elite distance runners, who controls what it gets spent on, and what was it spent on in 2022. The other thing we had no idea about is the fee that it costs to actually have a label status assigned to you as a race. Uh, that's a massive amount of money. $50,000 for a platinum label race means World Athletics collected again a little bit over $500,000, $600,000 from platinum label road races for the races on the calendar in 2023. But then also for athletes that are seeking platinum or gold label status, again, not in their credit card rewards points, but to actually be a World Athletics platinum or gold label athlete, their agent has to pay a fee that's either $1,200 or $400, depending on the ranking, or they have to pay the fee. And if they don't, they get skipped over and it goes to the next person. We definitely are interested in doing a little bit more research to see how the World Athletics rankings line up with the specific label status for people. And the other layer for that, too, is the number of agents. And uh, I would say the low or the few number of agents that represent people in the top 150 in the world in the marathon event group and other races too. We definitely want to take a little bit closer look at the track in athletics and track and field to see if there's a similar sort of process that people have to go through, if there's different types of rules that they can subscribe to as well. If you found this interesting, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can send us a DM if you go to running.theshow at running.theshow on Instagram. You can find the link in the show notes as well. We would love to hear anything you thought about this episode. Tag us in your Instagram stories. Let us know what you would like to hear about, and we would love to take a deep dive in on what you would like to listen to. Please let us know what guests you'd like to have on in the future. We would love to talk to anybody and everybody on the spectrum of running, in the intersection of running and business. For now, that wraps up this episode. Thanks to anybody who listened to our first deep dive into label races, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Bye-bye.